Hello everybody and welcome back. In this tip, I'm going to review 5 of the most common date functions: DATEPART, DATENAME, DATETRUNC, DATEADD, and DATEDIFF. For those of you that are new here, my name's Andy. I'm the founder of VizWiz.com. I created this channel to inspire, teach, and make you great at Tableau. Let's get started. To begin, I've created this cheat sheet for you. It reviews DATEPART, DATENAME, and DATETRUNC. These 3 functions are often confused, and I want to show you the difference between them. On the left-hand side, we have each of the date parts. There's 10 of these. We have year, quarter, month, etc. The date part column gives you the syntax. We can see we have date part, and then the date part that you want to pass to it, and the date. In this column, you'll see that Tableau returns integers. The DATENAME function is configured exactly the same way, except this time it returns the name. For example, for the month and the weekday date part, we see it brings back September and Thursday, respectively. So the only difference between DATEPART and DATENAME is that month and weekday return a string. The DATETRUNC function allows us to truncate the date to the level specified by the date part. For example, when we look at the date of September 16th of 2021 and we specify month for the date part, we can see that our DATETRUNC function truncates the date to the monthly level, or the first day of the month. I'm going to review a couple of examples of each of these, but use this cheat sheet as a way to get you started. Over here in Tableau, I have a sample data set that has a bunch of order dates and ship dates. I'm going to right-click and drag order date to the rows, and pick order date discrete to give me the lowest level of granularity. I'm going to create a new calculated field to look at the date part at the monthly level. So I'm just going to call this date part month so that you have it later for reference. My function is DATEPART, and then I need to pass to it one of my 10 date parts, and that's this column on the left-hand side. So I'm going to specify month, and these are required to be in lowercase within single quotation marks. And then I need to pass to it the date I want to evaluate. So in this case, order date. Let's click on OK. And notice Tableau brings it back as an integer and a measure. Tableau puts it in the measure section because it thinks it's something it wants to count. But we don't want that. We want these to be individual items. So I'm going to drag the date part month field up to my dimensions. Let's drag that field to the rows, and we can see that Tableau returns the number of the month. Well, how does that work for DATENAME? Let's create another calculated field called DATENAME, month. In this case, I'm just going to refer to the DATENAME function. So type in DATENAME, and then again we need to specify the date part that we're interested in. And in this case, I'm going to choose month, and I need to specify the date I want to evaluate. So we've got order date. Let's click on OK, and this time Tableau brings it back as a string. Let's drag that field to the rows, and we can see we now get the name of the month. So that's the main difference between DATEPART and DATENAME. DATEPART returns an integer, DATENAME returns a string.
Let's now look at our DATETRUNC function. Again, I have my list of order dates down the left-hand side, and notice that the granularity of these is all the way down to the minute level. I'm going to create a new calculated field. I'm going to call this one DATETRUNC month, because I want to truncate to the first day of each month. My function is DATETRUNC. I want to pass to it one of my 10 date part options. I'm going to choose month, comma, order date. Click on OK. And if I right-click and drag that to the rows, I'm going to pick DATETRUNC month discrete. You'll see that for my first row, I have September 16th, and that truncates down to September 1st. January 21st truncates to January 1st. So what does that look like if we truncate to the yearly level? Let's create another calculated field, and I'm going to call this one DATETRUNC year. The function I'm going to use again is DATETRUNC. This time I'm going to pass it year inside of single quotes, comma, order date. Click on OK, and now I'm going to right-click and drag that to the rows, pick DATETRUNC year, click OK, and now you can see any of the order dates that are in 2021 truncate down to January 1st of 2021. Any dates in 2022 truncate to January 1st of 2022.
So what does the DATEADD function do? The DATEADD function allows us to add an interval to any date. So for example, let's say that my expected ship date is within 3 days of the order. I'm going to right-click and create a calculated field, and I'm going to call this expected ship date. In this case, I'm going to use the DATEADD function. Now over here on the right-hand side, you can see Tableau specifies the syntax. Very similar. We first need to specify our date part. That's one of the 10 date parts that are in that cheat sheet. the interval, so that's how many items do I want to add, and then the date I want to add them to. So we're going to specify day. Again, if I go over to my cheat sheet, you'll see day is one of my date parts. I want to add 3 days to it, so put a comma, and then my interval is 3. And then the date field I want to add them to is order date. Click on OK, and Tableau returns the field as a date time. Let's right-click and drag that to the rows, and choose Expected Ship Date, Discrete. And we can see that all of our orders have 3 days added to them to get our expected ship date. So now let's look at the DATEDIFF function. The first thing I want to do is I want to look at the difference between my order date and my ship date, because I want to know the number of days it took to actually ship the product. Let's create a new calculated field by right-clicking and choose Create Calculated Field. And let's call this Days to Ship. In this case, we're going to look at the DATEDIFF function. And again, over here on the right-hand side, we can see our syntax. So we have DATEDIFF, and then the date part that we want to use, the start date and the end date. So my date part is day, again inside of single quotes and lowercase, comma, I need to put in my start date. So my start date is going to be my order date, the day the product was ordered, and my end date is the ship date. Let's click on OK, and Tableau brings that back as an integer, which makes sense because we're calculating the number of days between the two. I'm going to change my default aggregation for that field to be an average because I want to know the average days to ship. I'm going to right-click on the days to ship field, go down to Default Properties, Aggregation, and choose Average. Now when I drag days to ship to the text shelf, you can see I get the average days to ship. If I wanted to look at maybe the number of hours it took to ship, I'm going to again right-click and choose Create Calculated Field, and I'm going to call it Hours to Ship. My syntax again is going to be DATEDIFF, but in this case the date part that I want to use is hour. In my DATEDIFF function, the date part I want to specify is hour inside of single quotes. My start date is order date, and my end date is ship date. Click on OK. Let's drag that field on top of the numbers in the table. And we can see that the hours to ship for our first order were 48. It took 456 hours to deliver this product. So one more example. This time we're going to look at the number of days that the product was late. I'm going to right-click and drag ship date to the rows this time, and pick ship date discrete. I'm going to right-click and drag expected ship date to the rows, and choose Expected Ship Date Discrete. Now that we have these two fields, we can calculate the difference between them to let us know whether or not the product was late. I'm going to right-click and create a calculated field, and I'm going to call this one Days Delayed. In this case, I'm going to use my DATEDIFF function again. The date part I want to specify is day. My start date is my ship date in this case, and my end date is my expected ship date. We could end up with negative numbers, and that just means it was shipped early. Let's click on OK. If I drag that onto the table, we can see the first product was delayed by 1 day. The third product was delivered 16 days early. Okay, last scenario. Let's say we want to look at which weekdays had the largest delays. I'm going to create a new sheet. I'm going to right-click and drag order date to the rows, and choose weekday. Now what I want to calculate is which weekdays had the largest number of delays. So I'm going to right-click, create a calculated field, and I'm just going to call this one is delayed. And because I've already calculated my days delayed field, I'm going to say days delayed is less than 0. Click on OK, and I get a true-false field in my dimensions. I'm going to right-click and drag that to the columns, and choose Count is Delayed. Change this to a bar chart. Maybe rotate it, and I can see which weekdays had the largest number of delays. I hope you enjoyed this tip. Please give it a like, leave a comment, and share it with someone that you think might find it useful. Thanks, friends. I appreciate that. I'll be back with another tip next week, so don't forget to click on subscribe.